Rescued a puppy from a whiteout. It grew into something terrifying. He wasn't moving. Just a lump of white against white until his eyes opened. I thought I'd found another casualty of the storm, not a shepherd puppy fighting the blizzard alone. By the time I reached him, the wind had stolen my breath, and maybe my fear too. My hands burned against the ice when I lifted him, a German shepherd puppy, barely breathing, frost frozen to his lashes. He fit in both palms like something that shouldn't still exist in this kind of cold. The snow around him was pink from where the wind had split the skin on his paw pads. When I pressed him against my chest, I could feel the faintest heartbeat, like a whisper against my coat. "Not today, buddy. Not like this," I said through the scarf, my own voice cracking in the static of the wind. I was Michael Trent, 47 years old, former Army medic who'd seen enough death to know when it was supposed to win. But this little pup didn't look ready to quit. He was trembling, barely conscious, but there was something in his eyes, that raw, stubborn will to live that soldiers carry when the battle's already lost. I stumbled back toward the truck, boots disappearing in snow up to my knees. The blizzard screamed so loud it drowned out the sound of my heartbeat. I kept whispering to him, like a prayer I didn't know I still remembered. "You're safe now? You hear me? You're safe." He didn't answer. Not even a whine. Only that faint, ragged breath brushing against my sleeve. When I opened the door, the heater light flickered once, the last warmth I had left to give him. I wrapped him in my old army blanket, the same one I'd used in the desert years ago. Funny how it always seemed to come back to saving someone smaller than me. Outside, the storm erased the road, the world, everything. Inside, a German shepherd puppy lay against my chest, silent, pale, unreal. I looked at him and thought, maybe we were both ghosts, refusing to leave. He blinked once, slow, deliberate, as if to say, "Not yet." I didn't know it then, but that look would follow me long after the storm cleared. Because I hadn't just pulled a dog out of the snow that night. I'd pulled out a piece of my own life I thought was gone forever. And by the time I realized what I'd really rescued, it was already too late to turn back. He didn't shiver. Not once. Even when the clinic door slammed open and the heat hit him like a wave, the German shepherd puppy just lay there on the steel table, still as snowfall. Dr. Evans pressed the stethoscope to his chest, her brow furrowing, her voice low. "His paw's gone cold," she said. "But the heart, listen, steady as a drum." I leaned in, hearing that slow, impossible rhythm. I'd heard weaker hearts on battlefields that didn't make it back. But this one fought. They cut away the ice with scissors, careful, precise. Chunks fell like glass against the tray. I watched frost melt into pink, into life, into something that refused to stop. "He should be in shock," she murmured. The puppy blinked, calm, deliberate. No crying. No fear. Just those golden eyes locked on mine, asking nothing, demanding nothing. I couldn't look away. I'd seen that same stare in a mirror, back when silence was the only thing that kept me from breaking. "He's a miracle," she said, checking his limbs. I nodded, pretending I believed in that word. Maybe it wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was defiance. The German shepherd puppy didn't flinch when they inserted the IV, didn't move when the thermometer beeped, didn't even turn his head when the lights brightened. "He's too calm," she said, whispering like it was dangerous to speak louder. "He's freezing but not shaking." Her hand brushed his back and paused. "He's warm to the touch now. How?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. All I knew was that the room had stopped spinning, and for the first time in months, I wasn't trapped in some old nightmare. That stillness around him, it was familiar. Like the quiet before a firefight, like the hollow hum after it, the kind that both saves you and ruins you. She wrapped his paw in gauze, gentle, reverent. Then she frowned at the scale. He's what, almost 30 pounds? For 3 months? Her voice cracked in disbelief. That can't be right. I laughed once, dry and tired. "Guess he's just strong," I said, reaching to scratch behind his ear. He leaned into it, slow, deliberate, like he'd been waiting for that all along. His heartbeat echoed against my palm, steady, ancient, certain. Dr. Evans looked up, eyes narrowing as if seeing something I didn't. "Michael," she said softly, "are you sure he's just a dog?" I smiled without meaning to. Then I looked at him, really looked, and for a second I wasn't. But I told myself it didn't matter. Not then. Not yet. He didn't make a sound, not when I carried him inside, not when the bowl hit the floor, not even when the smell of food filled the cabin. The German shepherd puppy just stared, still as frost, eyes following every move like he was studying me. Not afraid, just aware. I'd seen silence before, the kind that comes after an explosion when everyone's too stunned to scream, but this wasn't that. This was choice. He was choosing stillness. He ate slow, deliberate, each bite measured like a soldier counting rations. No whining, no tail thump, no puppy energy, just breath and quiet. The storm outside clawed at the windows, but inside the air was thick with something else, something steady. When he finished, he sat back on his haunches and looked at me, like he was waiting for a verdict. "All right," I muttered. "Guess we're keeping each other alive tonight." That's when the name came to me. Kael. I'd heard it once overseas. It meant warrior of light in some old tongue. It fit, because there was nothing fragile about this pup. Even broken, he felt ancient. When I said it out loud, Kael, his ear twitched, slow, like the sound belonged to him before I spoke it. That night, I didn't turn on the TV, didn't pour a drink, didn't pace the room like I used to when the dark got too loud. Instead, I sat in the corner chair, watching the fireplace spit amber, listening to the hum of his breathing. When sleep came, it came quietly, the first real sleep I'd had in years. I woke up hours later, the kind of deep dark where you don't know where you are. The fire was out, the air had gone cold again, and there he was, sitting by the window, looking out into the snow, head high, eyes glowing faint in the moonlight. He didn't move when I whispered his name, just turned enough for me to see the reflection of the flames long gone. It felt like he was keeping watch. Like he was guarding the house from things I couldn't see anymore, the ones I carried inside. In the morning, he greeted me the same way, quiet, steady, unshakable. When I brushed his fur, the warmth from his skin soaked into my hands, grounding me in a way I couldn't explain. The vet had said rest, warmth, food. But Kael didn't rest. He observed. He healed faster than anything I'd seen. By the 5th day, the bandages were loose around his paw. By the 7th, I could swear he was taller. I thought I was imagining it, a trick of memory, fatigue, maybe hope. But when he walked past the couch, head level with my hip, I stopped pretending. Kael wasn't just growing, he was changing. And part of me wondered if I was supposed to change with him. Dr. Evans froze mid-sentence. The digital scale beeped twice, then flashed a number that didn't make sense. 48 pounds, she whispered. Michael, he's not even 12 weeks old. Kael sat there calmly on the exam table, ears forward, golden eyes steady, like he already knew what she'd say next. The German Shepherd puppy looked more like a small wolf now. Chest broad, paws massive, fur thick as winter itself. "It's not possible," she said, that voice trembling between awe and disbelief. I laughed, the kind of tired laugh that comes from people who've seen too much and still choose wonder. "He's just strong," I told her. But even as I said it, my voice cracked a little on just. Kael turned his head toward me, eyes narrowing like he'd heard something I hadn't. The clinic buzzed with that fluorescent hum that makes everything sound distant. His reflection in the metal table looked older, bigger than the dog sitting on it. When she reached for the thermometer, he didn't flinch, but the whole table vibrated under his weight. "He's healthy," she said finally, though her tone made it sound like a question. "Heart, lungs, everything. Oversized but perfect." Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window like slow-falling ash. Kael's gaze followed them until one landed on the glass, and then he huffed, soft, almost human, like the world outside bored him now. The vet smiled nervously. "You might want to track his growth. For science, if nothing else." "For science," I repeated, nodding, pretending my chest wasn't tightening with a feeling I didn't want to name. That night, the wind howled through the chimney and the fire painted the walls with restless shadows. Kael stretched across the bed beside me, long body curved like a question mark against the dark. When I'd first brought him home, he fit in one arm. Now his paws hung off the edge, claws brushing the floorboards with every breath. He sighed in his sleep, deep, rumbling, the kind of sound that settles into your ribs. I reached out and felt the rise and fall of his chest, steady, powerful. The German Shepherd puppy, no, the Shepherd dog now, had outgrown everything except his silence. He didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't dream the way dogs usually do. He just existed, like something the storm had carved and left behind to see if I could handle it. Some past midnight, a sharp bark cracked the air outside. Kael's eyes snapped open. He lifted his head, ears forward, muscles tightening under my hand. The low sound that came out of him wasn't a growl. It was older, deeper, closer to the mountains than the hearth. And for the first time, I realized the sound didn't belong to a puppy at all. The sound froze me mid-step. That wasn't a growl, it was a warning. Low, ancient, rolling from Kael's chest like thunder trapped in fur. He stood in the doorway, head high, teeth barely visible beneath his breath. Outside, something had barked again, sharp, nervous, and then silence. Kael didn't move until the night went still. Then, with a final rumble, he turned his gaze toward me, and I swear the air changed. That's when I understood. I didn't just rescue a German Shepherd puppy. I brought home the ghost of the wild. Morning light hit his fur like snowfire. Bright, unreal, too much for a regular dog. We started walking the trail by the frozen lake, just the two of us. At first, people smiled, called him beautiful. But as weeks passed, their eyes shifted. They looked at him like you'd look at lightning, something you can admire only from a safe distance. One guy at the gas station muttered, "That's not a dog, man." I laughed it off, but my hands were trembling when I paid. Kael sat by the door, silent, regal, not even glancing at the man. He didn't need to. Some part of him already knew what people didn't want to admit, that fear comes easy when you see yourself reflected in something you can't control. At night, I'd sit by the fire watching Kael's silhouette against the window, broad, still, patient. The world saw a Wolfdog. I saw the only thing keeping me steady. Funny, isn't it? A man trying to tame his ghost ends up befriending one. My therapist once said PTSD makes you see danger in everything. I told her sometimes danger keeps you alive. Still, there were moments when I wondered if Kael's silence mirrored mine too perfectly. He didn't bark, didn't play, didn't even flinch when thunder rolled. He just placed that massive head on my knee and stared into the fire like he remembered something older than both of us. It was strange comfort, like sitting beside the part of yourself you thought you buried. Then came that afternoon in town. Crowded grocery lot, noise, motion, smells, all the triggers I'd tried to forget. A car backfired nearby and my lungs shut down before I knew what was happening. The world narrowed into flashes, sand, blood, static. I stumbled, trying to breathe. My hand hit cold metal, shaking. And Kael, that half-wolf, half-shepherd creature, stepped in front of me. No bark. No panic. Just presence. He blocked the world with his body, pressed his weight against my leg, grounding me like an anchor in a storm. People froze. Someone whispered, "Easy, Wolf." But Kael didn't even look at them. He looked only at me. And for the first time in years, the noise stopped before it swallowed me. When my breathing slowed, he exhaled, deep, heavy, satisfied, and nudged my hand with that massive head. I laughed, hoarse, shaking. "Yeah," I said, stroking his fur. "You saved me, didn't you?" Kael's eyes flicked toward the horizon. Something primal burned there. Not pride, not pity, just recognition. Like he knew exactly what it meant to drag someone back from the edge. It took me a while to notice it, how my breathing synced with his. Whenever the nightmares came, Kael was there before I even opened my eyes. That giant white shepherd dog would stand beside the bed, still as a ghost, waiting for me to come back from wherever my mind had gone. When I'd sit up, gasping, he'd press his weight against me until my heartbeat found his rhythm. Slow, steady, real. I used to think dogs mirrored us. Now I'm sure some of them fix us piece by piece without saying a word. He was no longer the German Shepherd puppy I'd pulled from the storm. He was enormous. The size of a wolf, the calm of a monk, the patience of something older than either of us. Kids in town called him the Snow Wolf. Adults crossed the street when we walked by. I didn't care, because every time I looked at Kael, I saw peace. Not the kind you earn, but the kind that finds you when you stop running from it. I started testing it one night. When my chest tightened, I'd count his breaths instead of my own. When the room felt too small, I'd rest a hand on his back and feel the mountain under his skin. That's what he was, a mountain with fur. He didn't ask, he just knew. He'd sense it coming before I did. That split second before the flashback when my hands went cold and my vision blurred. He'd nudge my knee, soft, grounding me back in the moment. "Still here," I'd whisper. He'd blink once, like saying, "I know." Sometimes he'd sit by the porch for hours, nose tilted to the wind, as if listening to something miles away. Wolves howled in the distance sometimes, faint, lonely. Kael never answered, but I could tell he heard them. That quiet strength of his, it was both comforting and terrifying. like he was built from the same silence that had nearly broken me. We walked trails at dusk, his white fur glowing in the dying light. Every crunch of snow beneath his paws echoed like a heartbeat. He'd stop now and then, ears turning towards something unseen, then glance back at me, as if making sure I was keeping up, not just on the trail, but in life. It's strange how a rescued puppy can rescue you right back, and in ways that don't make sense until you realize you've stopped counting nightmares. Then came the night that changed everything again. I was chopping wood when I noticed the wind had gone still, that eerie kind of silence where even the trees hold their breath. Kael had slipped into the woods an hour earlier, nose to the ground, tracking something. He always came back before dark, but when he returned this time, his fur shimmered red in the porch light. For a heartbeat, I thought it was the sunset. Then I saw it wasn't. Blood streaked across his shoulder, glistening against white fur. I froze. He stood there, breathing slow, eyes calm, no limp, no wound. The blood wasn't his. And before I could speak, Kael looked past me, out toward the tree line, and growled low, deep, and ancient, a sound that didn't belong to any dog at all. The knock came before sunrise. I was still cleaning the dried blood off Kael's fur, what was left of it. He sat by the stove, calm as a saint, while I tried to stop my hands from shaking. When I looked into his eyes, there wasn't an ounce of fear, only that same quiet knowing, the look of something that's seen storms come and go and never once bowed to them. The story had already spread through town. Big white wolf saves kid near the creek. They made it sound like a fairy tale. But I'd seen the truth. The flash of teeth, the scream, the blur of motion before Kael threw himself between that boy and the coyote. No hesitation, no thought. Just instinct. The kind that doesn't ask permission to be brave. By the time I reached them, Kael had driven the animal off, standing over the child like a statue carved out of snow and fury. The boy was safe. Kael's muzzle was red. Not from fear, from duty. Now 2 men in parkas stood at my porch, their jackets stamped wildlife control. One of them had a clipboard. The other, a tranquilizer rifle. "Morning, sir," the first said. "We got reports of a Wolfdog attack." "Attack?" I barked out a laugh, cold and sharp. "He saved a kid." They exchanged a look. "Maybe," the second man said, "but that's not a domestic breed." I could feel Kael behind me, motionless, watching them through the half-open door. The air felt heavier just having him near. "He's an Arctic-influenced shepherd mix," I said. "A German shepherd puppy grown big, that's all." The taller man lifted a photo from his clipboard. "Sir, that's not how shepherds grow." Something inside me cracked at his tone. That detached, procedural kind of authority that never had to look a creature like Kael in the eye. "You think you know him from a chart?" I asked. "He's my dog, my family." But they weren't listening. They never do once they've decided what fits inside the box and what doesn't. The man with the clipboard sighed, scribbled something down, and tore off a yellow slip. "This is an order for DNA verification. You'll need to bring him in within 72 hours. Kael stepped forward then, slow, deliberate. The men froze. For a second, no one breathed. The rising sun hit his coat, turning every strand of white into fire. The taller man swallowed hard. "That's not a dog," he whispered. Kael tilted his head, ears flicking once. Then, as if deciding they weren't worth his time, he turned and walked back inside. I stood there in the doorway, paper trembling in my hand. DNA verification. As if a piece of paper could tell them what I already knew, that Kael wasn't wild. He wasn't domestic either. He was something in between, something that didn't fit the system, same as me. When I looked down at the yellow notice, I caught myself smiling, tired, sad, but real. 72 hours, I murmured. Inside, Kael lay by the fire, watching me like he already understood what it meant. And for the first time, I felt the faintest trace of fear. Not for me, for him. The paper burned fast, too fast for something that heavy. I watched the yellow slip curl into black and vanish, the words DNA verification melting into ash. It wasn't rebellion, it was survival. Because if they took Kael, they wouldn't just cage a wolfdog, they'd break the only thing still keeping me alive. Kael lay by the stove, head on his paws, eyes reflecting the fire like twin mirrors. No fear in them, just calm. That strange Arctic calm that comes before a blizzard. The world could collapse and he'd still look at me like nothing out there mattered. Like home wasn't a place, it was a bond. That's the thing about creatures like him. They don't obey laws, they are laws. old, unwritten ones about loyalty and silence and dying where you belong. By noon, I drove him into town for what I told myself was a routine checkup. The vet, an older woman who'd patched Kael up more than once, looked at me too long before saying anything. "He's not just a German shepherd, is he?" I swallowed. He's an Arctic-influenced shepherd mix. That's what the form says." She sighed. "The form's lying." Then she leaned closer, voice low, almost shaking. "Michael, he's part Arctic wolf, maybe more than part, but he's bonded to you. If they take him, he won't make it through captivity." Her words hit harder than any mortar blast I'd ever heard. Part wolf. But I'd known that already, hadn't I? In the way he moved, silent but deliberate. In how his gaze didn't ask for permission, it commanded presence. He wasn't tamed, he'd just chosen me. And I realized that's all love really is, a choice to stay when the wild inside you says run. I nodded once. "Then they won't take him." She looked at me the way soldiers look at each other before impossible missions. "Then you need to disappear for a while." That night, the sky hung low and gray, pressing on the cabin roof like it wanted in. I packed quietly, a few rations, first aid, Kael's blanket, the one from the blizzard. He watched from the corner, tail motionless, reading every move I made. When I clipped the leash, he didn't resist, but his eyes said everything. "You're too late, they're already coming." And he was right, because before I could douse the fire, headlights crawled up the snowpath, 2 beams cutting through the trees. Kael stood, ears forward, body between me and the door. Then came the sound that makes your stomach drop. 3 heavy knocks against the wood, the kind that don't ask permission to come in. The moment the 3rd knock hit the door, Kael was already moving. No bark, no growl this time, just motion, pure and quiet, like wind finding its path, through the back door, into the black forest beyond the cabin. And I followed, because that's what loyalty does. It doesn't pause to reason. Snow was already falling thick, heavy, relentless, the kind that blinds you in seconds. The storm had come back for us. I could hear engines behind me, voices yelling through the wind. Words like containment and tranquilizer. I didn't stop to listen. Kael's white fur flashed between the trees like lightning made of breath. He didn't run like a dog. He moved with the low glide of something born from the wilderness itself, the wolfdog that had no master, only a bond. The Arctic in his blood seemed to awaken in that storm. Every stride was freedom written against the blizzard. The wind howled. It sounded almost alive, as if the mountain itself had decided to test us. I stumbled, gasping, snow biting my lungs, my boots vanishing into drifts. But every time I faltered, I'd see Kael ahead, pausing just enough to look back, eyes glowing faint amber against the whiteout. It was like he was saying, "Keep going. Don't stop now." By the time we reached the ridge, the same ridge where I'd first found him months ago, the world had turned to noise and light. No up, no down. Just the roar of the wind and the pulse in my ears. I yelled his name, but the storm swallowed it whole. My voice didn't travel more than a few feet before being ripped away. Kael turned once more, body outlined by lightning's reflection off the snow. Even through the chaos, I could see the strength in him, that mix of shepherd discipline and wolf defiance, the Arctic hybrid that didn't know where one ended and the other began. And maybe that's why I followed him. Because I didn't know where my fear ended and my faith in him began. We climbed higher, toward the pass where sky met mountain. The path vanished under feet of snow. I could barely see him now, a blur of white in white, a ghost leading a broken man. But I knew he was there. I could feel him. That bond doesn't need sight. It's built from shared silence. From nights when both of you forget how to breathe, until the other reminds you. Then, in one heartbeat, he was gone. The shape ahead disappeared. No sound, no movement, just the storm swallowing him whole. "Kael!" I screamed, the wind cutting it into pieces. Nothing answered, only the white, only the storm. I kept moving forward, half blind, half broken, until I couldn't tell if I was still chasing him or becoming him. And somewhere between those two, the line between law and loyalty finally disappeared. Because I wasn't running from anyone anymore. I was running to him. But in that whiteout, even the truth had no direction. And for the first time since that day, I'd found him in the snow. I couldn't find my Wolfdog. The storm didn't feel like weather anymore. It felt like war. Wind screamed through the pines, snow slicing sideways, erasing everything but the sound of my own heartbeat. My flashlight had died hours ago. My voice was next. Kael. Nothing. Just the avalanche of white and the low, endless moan of the blizzard. I kept walking because stopping meant dying, and because somewhere out there was a wolfdog who'd never once left me behind. The snow hit like fists, stinging my face raw. Each step was slower than the last. The storm clawed at my coat, ripped at my breath. I could feel the cold crawling into my bones. That slow, creeping kind of death I'd seen take men before they realized it was happening. But I wasn't leaving him. Not my Arctic influence shepherd mix. Not my Kael. Somewhere between one breath and the next, the world folded into silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that feels like the earth holding its breath right before it breaks. And then I saw it. Movement in the blur, a shape too big to be real. A ghost in motion. White on white, impossible to see until it was already there. He came out of the storm like something ancient, something the mountain itself had carved and set loose. Kael. But not the Kael I'd known. Bigger, heavier, his coat matted with ice, his eyes burning gold through the snow. And behind him, a human form, limp, half-buried, a jacket torn and blue with frost. Kael was dragging him by the sleeve, one massive paw at a time, fighting the wind. A lost hiker, a tourist maybe, swallowed by the storm. I dropped to my knees beside them, fingers clumsy and numb. The man's pulse fluttered under my glove. Alive. Barely. Kael stood over us, chest heaving, fur coated in ice, every breath a cloud of steam. His eyes found mine, and for a moment it wasn't man and dog. It was two survivors who'd carried too many ghosts, and still chose to keep going. "You brought him out," I whispered. He blinked once, slow, steady, the same way he had that first night in the clinic, when he refused to shiver. That quiet defiance of death. That knowing. I wrapped my coat around the stranger, pressing my body heat against his. Kael lay beside us, wrapping his massive frame around both of us, shielding us from the wind like a living wall. The warmth that came off him felt unreal, wild, primal, ancient, the kind that doesn't ask permission to save you. I don't know how long we stayed like that, me, the stranger, and the wolfdog who shouldn't have existed. But when the storm began to ease and light broke through the clouds, I realized my hands were trembling, not from cold, but from something else. Gratitude, awe, love. Kael looked up, snow melting down his muzzle, and pressed his head into my chest like he was making sure I was still breathing. And that's when I said it, voice cracking through the wind. "You didn't just save him." My throat closed around the words. "You saved me again." He leaned into me harder, that impossible mix of wolf and shepherd, protector and ghost. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry, because the storm was over and the wild had come home. They said no one survives a whiteout like that. But Kael did, and somehow, so did I. By the time the storm cleared, search teams had already been sent. They found us curled together in the snow. Me, the unconscious tourist, and the Arctic influence shepherd mix who refused to move until help arrived. He didn't let them touch me at first. He stood there, massive and still, chest heaving, eyes locked on the rescuers like he was judging whether they'd earned the right to come close. And for a moment, even the paramedics hesitated, because what they were looking at wasn't a dog. It was something far older, a wolfdog guardian that the storm itself had built. News spread fast. Man and wolf save hiker in Colorado blizzard. Reporters called him the White Giant. Wildlife Control called again, of course, but this time, they didn't come with tranquilizers. They came with cameras and questions and an apology. One of them said, "Some bonds go beyond the law." Another, a vet from Denver, looked at Kael with tears in her eyes and whispered, "He's the kind of miracle science doesn't measure." Kael didn't care. He just sat there beside me as I gave my statement, tail brushing the snow, gaze calm and unblinking. He wasn't built for crowds or praise. He was built for silence, for healing what words couldn't reach. And maybe that's why he stayed. Months later, I started volunteering at a veterans rehabilitation center in Estes Park. The place smelled like coffee, antiseptic, and quiet grief. Men like me, men who'd walked through their own storms, sat in circles, eyes hollow, hands restless. At first, Kael was too large for the room. Literally. The Arctic wolfdog barely fit through the door, and his fur brushed the tables as he passed. But the moment he lay down, the noise in the room changed. He didn't bark, didn't perform. He just walked from one man to another, pressing his forehead against shaking hands, curling his giant frame around whoever needed to breathe again. The first time it happened, a Marine named Paul started sobbing. He hadn't spoken in 2 years. He just buried his face in Kael's neck and let go. And Kael, my Kael, didn't move an inch. He just stayed there, heartbeat steady, anchoring someone else the way he'd once anchored me. I watched from across the room, throat tight. Every veteran in that circle, every scar, every silence, found a little air that day. Because of a creature who was never meant to be tamed but chose gentleness anyway. That's the real strength of the wolf, not in its teeth, but in its mercy. By the end of the week, they started calling him the Giant, a white wolfdog with the soul of a soldier, the kind of presence that makes broken men remember they're still alive. And when one of the older vets, a man who hadn't smiled since Afghanistan, finally reached out to stroke his fur, Kael leaned into the touch and closed his eyes. The man whispered, almost to himself, "I forgot what peace felt like." I turned away before they could see me crying, because Kael didn't just save my life. He was saving all of us, one heartbeat at a time. Some evenings when the center gets quiet, I take Kael outside and we just sit behind the building, the two of us and the wind. He lies down with his massive body pressed against my leg, his fur glowing pale under the last of the light, and the mountains rise around us like a cathedral built by something far older than mercy. The air here smells different, pine, cold stone, a hint of snow even in summer. Kael closes his eyes, that Arctic-influenced shepherd mix heart still wild under the calm. Every time I touch him, I feel it, that thrum of the wolf beneath the gentleness, the reminder that he was never truly mine. I was just the man who listened when the wild decided to speak. People still ask me how I trained him. I don't correct them anymore. You don't train something like Kael. You earn him, every day, every breath. He's not obedience, he's trust. And trust like that, it's the rarest kind of miracle. I've seen veterans who couldn't look another soul in the eye reach for his fur like it was a lifeline. I've seen men wake from nightmares, shaking, only to find Kael's head on their chest, that quiet heartbeat saying, "You're still here." And I've learned something that no law, no textbook, no therapy session ever taught me. Healing doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from silence, from a wolfdog who chooses you when he doesn't have to. The world tried to put Kael into a category, wild, dangerous, unfit for people. But the truth is, he became the very thing that keeps people alive. He taught me that healing isn't about taming what's wild, it's about understanding it. Because sometimes what's wild in us is what still knows how to love. So yeah, I still hear the wind some nights, and I still remember the storm. But now when it howls, Kael lifts his head and howls back, not in fear, but in answer. A sound that says, "We survived. Together." This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy or a half-wild wolfdog is more than love. It's responsibility. It's connection. It's what makes us human. If Kael's story touched you, don't look away the next time you see an animal in need. Reach out. Because sometimes saving one life saves two. Join our brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.